Very pleased to welcome my next guest, who's Akhil Ahmed, former, he's currently Professor of Media and former BBC executive. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, mate.
Look, I know some people have texted and said, oh, why are we still talking about Catherine and Princess Catherine? I understand that. But I would like to talk around the media and the media's role in this. I think it's pretty clear that social media went ridiculously mad with conspiracy theories. And we've seen many leading people on social media apologising for the nonsense they were putting out. Can I ask you, first of all, though, what do you think about the role of mainstream media in this? Have they coalesced, as some say, and almost defended and protected the Princess of Wales? Or have they, in a way, fueled the conspiracy theories by just talking about them?
Well, that's a very good question, because I think they're in a tough position, the mainstream media, as it were, whether we're talking about newspapers or television and radio. I think it's a difficult thing, because obviously it's a big story. When something's a big story, you have to talk about it. So effectively, yes, they have been, effectively fanning the flames, as it were. But I think what option was there, really? I think the real story here is less about the mainstream media and more about social media. And as you said, what it shows you is that actually what you didn't get in the mainstream media was statements about this is definitely the case, or that kind of the conspiracies weren't kind of like said as a fact. They were reported, or the whole subject was given that kind of oxygen. But on social media, people were saying things as if they were a fact. And actually what it shows you is that lack of training, that lack of journalistic kind of rigor, in people who claim to be journalists. This is where it came to the fore, because anybody with any common sense realized, I knew from day one, something was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong. I knew there was something wrong because it was being handled so badly. So for me, there were two stories here. One is why it was handled so badly. And secondly, from the social media point of view, this shows you something, which is the lack of journalistic training of people who claim to be journalists. That's the problem.
Well, we'll deal with both of those, because I think you've nailed it, as I would expect a professor to do. So thank you for that. Let's deal with the social media. Do we now have to accept that, if you like, the primacy source of media is actually social media now? And does that call, therefore, logically, for some means of trying to raise the bar, the standards, or as some would say, control?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult to kind of have regulation of social media. I think what you're really asking for is actually for the social media companies themselves to actually step up, realize it's not just about making money, and actually have some kind of decency and regulate themselves. Now, with regards to social media and all this, I think the real issue is it's really hard to know. So what it does is actually it creates this kind of lack of faith that people have in the media as a whole, because people often see social media, particularly young, and statistics and around the world show us this, that young people get the information primarily from social media rather than kind of conventional media or mainstream media. And that's the problem, because actually everything melts into one, and I don't think they realize sometimes that what they're getting is actually just targeted towards them, and actually is taking them down a rabbit hole.
But then surely there is a huge challenge to tackle this at source, and the only chance we have of tackling this at source is when people are in the state system for education. And we should, in many ways, thinking about the huge influence social media has and will play, and as artificial intelligence grows more, we have to we have to train, don't we, people to have critical thinking about what's going on. I'm getting to the point where I think it should be, up there with maths and reading and writing.
Well, you're not far off. I know some people might snigger at that. I think you're right, and I think we're not far away from that particular point. Look, the school world that I went to is very different to the world that my kids and people who are younger than them living now. And the fact of the matter is, social media, mobile phone technology, the next iteration of what that will be as well, clearly means that people are not getting their information from the sources that they're used to. So how do you educate people? You know, there's a phrase called media literacy. What's the media literacy? You know, people don't know the difference between what they get from a paid for kind of like, you know, grifter on social media and a journalist who actually has number of sources and has facts and etc. and all of those kind of things. So because of that, people think it's all one. And actually what you've got is, and particularly with the photograph, remember the Kate photograph, what that's done is actually increase that kind of, that feeling that people have here and around the world that there's no faith in the media full stop anyway. So what we have to do is have some form of regulation, whatever that may be. And I think self-regulation may be important for some of the social media companies. And alongside that, I think you're right. We have to start having some form of, as I think it will happen. I think it's inevitable over the next few years. When we get in schools and colleges, etc., people will have to have.
It may be too late by then.
Social media.
It may be too late.
It might be too. Yeah. It may be too late, but I think we're looking at the next kind of iteration of what this is going to be. I think right now we're actually struggling to keep up with the technological change, and actually struggling to keep up with the fact that we are being told by survey after survey that people have lost faith and in mainstream media, as it were, and they get their information from other places. Okay. Not helped by politicians, not just around the world, but in our country as well.
Okay, let's just move on quickly to your second point, which you were talking about, if you like, well, this is my word, the chaos that was behind the organisation and management of the news. I suppose the main point is there was a vacuum of news from the palace, wasn't there? And where there's a vacuum, as I know as an ex-politician, lots of strange things can fill that vacuum. Is that fundamentally where it went wrong, do you think?
I think so. I remember watching, seeing that photograph unravel for a start. The Mother's Day photograph. And what that did was actually, I don't know who was advising, who was behind all of this, but actually that kind of, in that vacuum, anything you can step into it and say anything. And actually, if you look at some of the internet madness now as well, social media madness about the video that the Princess of Wales released yesterday, there are people now saying that's not true as well. And they're saying it's not true because that photograph. So in actual fact, whoever was behind that photograph and some of the and the lack of information that people have been given over the last few weeks have actually that's another nail in the coffin of people's belief in a free and fair media, because they're actually believing that. If you can't believe the royal family, then who can you believe? That's what people will be thinking because of that photograph. And actually, I'm not blaming the royal family, but I'm blaming the people behind that, because that did not come out with people signing it off.
But there's a massive contradiction here, and this makes me think that whatever they did, there's going to be a conspiracy, because what sparked the furor around Kate's photo was the agencies, the photographic agencies, said don't touch it. So you can kind of see the gaffe. But no one's come out since last night where this has been played around the world and said don't touch it, it's fake. Yet the conspiracy still continues.
But the conspiracy continues because of that kind of lack of faith, because now people say, well, they were lying to us a few weeks ago, so they could still be lying to us now. And that's not me saying it. I think it's quite clearly not a fake, you know, if you watch it. And I think that's what all the media agencies are saying as well. But what we're seeing is this lack of trust in the news is not helped by what can only be described as a silly attempt at trying to create a photograph from a mishmash of other images that already
existed. So part shooting yourself in the foot a little bit here, but the problem still goes on of the lack of control over social media. Professor Akhil Ahmed, Professor of Media and former BBC executive. It doesn't say where he's a Professor of Media of. I should have known that, so forgive me, I can't do that. But thank you very much for your contribution. Very much appreciated.